Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. This is the third episode in our limited Move Your Mind series for the construction industry. And on today's episode, we spoke to Angelina Pillai. She is the Chief Executive Officer at the Association of Consulting Architects, and she does a lot of work in lobbying for the rights of people in a number of areas within the industry. And we thought it would be interesting to have this chat because architecture is such an integral part of the construction industry. It really bleeds into everything, and it's something that's often overlooked in terms of looking after people in that industry. It was a really interesting chat. It added to the conversation of what we're exploring, and we'll be continuing this until the end of the year. So we'll at least get to 10 episodes, and then we'll assess how we're going, and we're getting a lot of feedback, so we might continue it. So thank you again for supporting Move Your Mind. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to our website, moveyourmind.me. You can join our community. You can find that on moveyourmind.me. And you can purchase the Move Your Mind book by going to nickbracks.com/book. Angelina, so great to talk to you again. We just before we started recording, you reminded me that you used to come into the lobby, which was a cafe I owned a long time back. So crazy, such a small world. And now I'm, I'm sitting in Canada right now and talking to you. And it's just so funny, like how these different connections that happen in life. So glad we can have this chat.
Lovely. Absolute pleasure. And thank you for inviting me, Nick.
No problem. No, appreciate it. Appreciate you making the time to have a chat. And, it's been really interesting with Move Your Mind. We're really focusing on the sort of construction building industry, and you being in a similar industry. It's interesting to have, we really want that varied sort of conversation about this industry and how mental health sort of ties into it and all that sort of thing. So great to have the opportunity to talk about it. So I guess to begin with, would you be able to just give a bit of a background on yourself and what you do?
Sure. Look, I would like to consider myself as one of this country's proud migrants. I was born overseas in Malaysia to Indian parents, and then I moved to the UK in my primary years. And then I came to Australia as a teenager, as an international uni student. That's going back a long time, actually, back in the early 90s. So I did, get around a little bit. Then post-tertiary studies, I made a very important decision to make Australia my permanent residence. And I guess in many ways, that was kind of the start of a very interesting time for me, both personally and professionally. And I consider myself quite lucky because I've got a home in Malaysia where my parents, siblings, my extended family live, and then here in Melbourne, with my husband, my two boys. So I've been really quite fortunate. And as for me, I've always been interested in human rights, and that has a lot to do with my own upbringing, my own beliefs, my values that have been informed through my travels, clearly, and lived experiences, particularly as they relate to, some of the injustices and discrimination that I faced prior to coming to Australia. Now, I won't go into all the details of that because that's like a whole other podcast. But
we can do a separate podcast on that another time. Yeah,
we could.
Yeah.
But for me, I guess I'm driven by the quest for equality, equity, inclusion, and all of these factors that ultimately play into mental well-being. I guess at a professional level, my career has been very much dominated in the education and professional development space. I've spent, the good part of the last 20 years across a number of sectors, government, the university sector, and a significant part of that has been representing a range of professions or industries through membership organizations. So, procurement, supply chain, human resources, where we first met, to general medical practice. And now, of course, in the architecture profession, where I'm the national CEO of the Association of Consulting Architects, also known as the ACA. And I also head up the diversity, culture and inclusion portfolio of the Australian Council of Professions that represents a further 20 plus professional bodies. So look, something about professional bodies that actually kind of, excite me.
But no, I love that. And I mean, you've got clear values and things that you're wanting to try and make a change in these industries. And I think it's so important. We need people like you, because I mean, as I've seen through the mental health work I've done in organizations in a whole range of different areas, like you're talking about equality, wellness, whatever we're focusing on, there's still a long way to go. And organizations are almost microcosms of society, where each organization has their own set of systems that are in place and take a lot of time to change. And these cultural things are not simple to change. So we need to be really, lobbying for it and having these conversations. So I think it's such an important thing that you're doing.
No, thank you, Nick. And that's so true. You talk about culture, you talk about wellness, and I guess professional practice is really it's about that. As a professional, regardless of what profession you're in, construction or otherwise, there's a code of ethics that governs how one practices. So it's adherence to those codes of ethics that really need to be fundamental in any sort of profession. So I think the professional bodies certainly play a big part in that. It's about raising the bar of professional practice and reminding, whether it's architects, engineers, or doctors or lawyers, that there is an obligation to ensure that well-being and ethical practice and equity is forefront of their work.
Yeah, and when it does come to that with mental health, well-being in these industries, from what you're seeing, has there been an improvement? Are there certain things that are happening? Are there areas that we need to maybe hone in and focus more on? What sort of trends are you seeing in these industries?
Look, I'll just and maybe just a bit of a background in terms of the ACA, because I think
Yes, yeah.
just I guess the context as to why the architecture profession in particular is going through. So the ACA, Association of Consulting Architects, we're a designated employer body. We were established in 1987 under the Fair Work Commission, and we're mandated to represent the interests of architectural practices here in Australia, so firms, and so industrial relations sits very much at the core of that charter, and as a result of that, equally critically is our active role in supporting these architectural practices with the business side of architecture. So not design, but the business management. And that's through, the development of tools, resources, advice, advocacy, including facilitating what I like to call, sort of thought leadership discussions like the one we're having today. And in amongst all of that, we're really committed to supporting practice as they relate to equitable practice, so innovative practice, and a commitment really to fostering healthy and vibrant work cultures. And those work cultures, and I alluded to it before, is about looking at the kind of end-to-end running of any practice, but embedding those really I guess viable, productive, cohesive and ethical work cultures. And just to kind of, I guess, unpack that a little bit more, I wanted to also reflect on the really important construction podcast series that you're championing. I listened to both Craig and Hayden's conversations with you, and the criticality of the construction industry and the range of professions that actually make up what is a very complex multi-billion dollar industry. I won't go through all the stats because both the guys had shared that. But if you think about the built environment and that kind of end-to-end building and design outputs, architecture plays a very integral part of that process, which then in turn shapes our lives, our communities, our cities, our world, and our very existence. And I'll even go so far as to say that the design of buildings has a massive impact on our well-being. How often have you walked into a space and left and felt something, whether it's good or bad? Poorly designed environments, with dodgy air quality or limited sunlight can have a really negative impact on your mood and your well-being. And similarly, really, well-designed spaces with lots of sunlight and lots of good air, can have some positive. So it's, so I think what I'm trying to say here is that architecture plays a really integral part of construction, but also the value that can also impact everybody else's well-being around them. But there's still a lot of misunderstanding, or worse still, a lot of lack of appreciation from consumers or procurers of architectural services on the value of architecture that it has in this world. And that's been a real cause for some of the negative well-being impacts that we're seeing in the profession. And that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. So, I guess to your point, and thank you for allowing me for that monologue, but I thought I just wanted to
thank you for, no, please. It's really interesting and I think important. And my sister's an architect, and, a lot of the stuff you're talking about is resonating a lot, from what I've heard from her as well. And I think, I can see it is such a valuable thing. So I love, hearing what you're saying.
Oh, look, so you kind of get it then. These are sort of the issues that we've been grappling with in the profession. And, COVID certainly has had a massive impact on the profession. And we know this for a fact because, we've collated some real life data. So all throughout COVID, we've pulse checked our members. We have over 800 practices that are members, well over 6,500 individuals. And we surveyed them across a whole range of categories. So from employment conditions, labor shortages, material shortages, supply chain issues, work pipelines, but also a big component of that survey was around well-being. And our last Pulse Check survey, it revealed some of the really significant impacts that the last few years have had on practice, architectural practices, directors, their employees. Even though, we've heard this a lot, labor shortages are absolutely critical, supply chain material shortages, prices are going up, but what's not going up is the income that a lot of these practices are generating. So there's a real mismatch between having to pay for all of these increases and then, what they're actually, the remuneration and flexibility, is now obviously a norm in the future. But in terms of mental well-being, there's a lot of exhaustion in the profession, there's a lot of fatigue, and because of this uncertainty of things, that's had a huge impact on the profession. And certainly this conversation that we're having is not just within the architecture profession, we're having also more broadly across the construction industry. So we're talking to the likes of other construction bodies within a sort of a national construction industry forum, and MBA and a whole heap of other bodies are also talking about this, which is, I think, really important. And just again reflecting on mental well-being in the architecture profession, it's for the longest time been subjected to problems. The Pulse Check survey alludes to some of these issues around the grueling hours, the long hours culture, the perfectionism that a lot of architects strive for, and a lot of it's, I guess, sometimes inflicted pressure of ensuring, high quality, safe outcomes, which of course can be, stressful. But then there's this, layer that on with things like fees or financial management issues, time management, and just the general undervaluing of architecture in our community has a big part to play in, I guess, the causes. So I've talked a lot about the causes, I guess, of why well-being is an issue in this profession.
Yeah, no, but and I guess is that a lot of it because of the many moving parts in that industry, and seeing architecture, I guess, not seeing it as tangible, I guess, as some of the other things people are doing, or what's the reasoning?
Really great question, and I'd love to talk about this. So if you just are you happy to let me talk about this, because I can
I would love you to. And just as a quick side note, I just saw your mug was had Geelong Cats on it, so I'm a mad keen Geelong supporter. So
hello, Premiers.
There we go. There we go. I just had to point that out before that, while that was in my mind. So very good.
Absolutely. A whole other podcast about Geelong. Let me tell you. I mean, it's just, anyway. Did you come down for the grand final, by the way?
No, I wish I was away, but the whole family was there. So they're
look.
They're all, they were very happy.
So are we. Look, I'm really sad Selwood's not there. But anyway, let's not go into that, because that's
yeah. Anyway, I'd love to hear about that side
Like,
of
sure.
with architecture. Yeah.
This will all be edited, won't it? So
Yeah, or I might keep it if we, if it works well, but we'll see. We'll see how we go.
if it works well. All right. So look,
Thank you so much for supporting Move Your Mind. We're expanding the offerings of the organisation and we're tailoring everything we do to suit you guys and to try and answer to all of your needs and the questions that you send in. The book is available globally. You can find all of the links at nickbracks.com/book. And we've just released the Move Your Mind community. We've currently got a men's community group, a women's community group, a general group. We're going to be loading up other groups, and you can find all of the links at moveyourmind.me. This group's been created based on the needs of what we've heard and learnt throughout running Move Your Mind. And we have live events, we've got courses, we've got huge amounts of value, the ability to share information, share ideas, work in groups together to grow and share your learnings, to learn about different topics. You get email reminders. There's a whole lot of features in there. We're constantly updating it, and we're so excited to share it with you. You can find all of the information about it at moveyourmind.me.
oh, I'm just lost from my train of thought here, but going back to mental well-being, why the ACA is taking the lead in establishing this kind of strategy that we have to support our members, and our members being, architectural practices, but also more broadly the profession at large. We've established this Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum here in Australia as part of the ACA, which builds on the really great work and the initiative started in the UK with founder Ben Shannon. And our aim is pretty straightforward. We don't really like to complicate too many things, but for us it's about raising the awareness of mental health issues within the profession, because there is still a stigma that exists across the board, and it's obviously just not this profession, but I think in general in our population. And it's also to create a supportive community of practitioners in each of those states to, across the country. ACA is a national organisation, to kind of meet on a regular basis, to share knowledge, to share their experiences, to research strategies in a bid to support architects' mental health in the workplace. There are some nuances and uniqueness around the work that architects do, and I'll talk about a little bit about that. But what this forum does is, and this is also generated by our profession asking us to be that platform to have our profession connect. And simultaneously, develop resources. So we also, as part of the forum, Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum, we've just released Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum Toolkit, which is again adapted from the UK. And what it is just, local resources, simple practical advice to individuals and practices about how to kind of ease a lot of the pressures that we're seeing. And the feedback that we're getting is that it's really quite very useful, but it addresses those areas. So, office overtime and culture areas. Architectural practices usually employ a lot of students, interns, graduates. So, how do you care for them? How do you make them feel, part of a culture? How do you foster their development within practice? So those are the areas we look at. I know the guys also talked about contracts. So, looking at contracts, how to manage clients and deadlines, and a few other things. And another area too that really supports the work that we're doing, we are partners in a research and development project. We're collaborating on this sort of national Australian Research Centre funded 3-year nationwide project on the well-being of architects across the country. It's the first of its kind, led by a Professor Naomi Stead, Miriam Boucher, and Byron Kinner. And these are just legends, by the way, in the profession, let me tell you. And I'm really honoured to be working with them. But the research findings are in 2 parts. So there's the practitioners survey, which are really where we're interested in because it's about employers. But there's also the students survey. They surveyed thousands and thousands of individuals, and so we've got some really good data that they've launched, and I'm happy to share that with you. And I'll just spend, kind of a minute on the former. So, what are the practitioner survey results telling us? And there are sort of 4 key themes that strongly emerged that have a direct impact. So, whilst we might have known this from previous years, what we have now is the data that's talking to this piece. And, I kind of have alluded to it. So the first is the value or the perceived lack of value of architecture. The second is around time management, so timelines, deadlines, overtime. Many respondents had observed that they had not learnt good time management skills during architectural education. So there's some really unrealistic timelines and stressful time pressures to get the job done. The third is around fees and remuneration. So this was around more of the structural impediments for remuneration. So you might have heard this a lot, and it's again across the construction industry, the race to the bottom, in fee undercutting, poor procurement practices, and all of that then leading to unrealistic deadlines, long hours, overtime, low pay. People have this perception that architects are for the elite. Architects are so expensive, and why don't we just defer the job to paraprofessionals? But I think there's that kind of overlap with what I was talking about before. And finally, what the research is telling us that we need to all come together across the industry for kind of collective structural action to kind of break down the stigma. So the work that's been happening, with master builders and all the other bodies within the construction industry, I think is really remarkable. So, and well done to you to kind of really bring that to the fore and have these conversations, because these are really important conversations to be had.
My name's Nick Bracks, and I'm a storyteller who has dedicated my entire adult life to creating positive conversations around mental health. In recent years, discussions around mental health have become less taboo and entered the mainstream vernacular. I've delivered over 1,000 mental health seminars around the globe, including several TED Talks, and I believe we all have a story to tell. In my book, Move Your Mind, I cover my story and stories from people that inspire me, as well as insights from world-leading mental health experts. This book will help you to learn how to recognise mental health issues before they become a problem. Use your personal challenges as motivators, take ownership of your well-being, and create new daily habits that increase happiness and reduce stress. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing all of that. And it's super interesting. And yeah, I think it is. It's such an important conversation to be had, because it does make up such a big portion of the industry, of people, of people that are working in so many parts of Australia and overseas. So really important to talk about and get these insights. And how have you seen improvements in recent years in general in the mental health sort of conversation in these industries?
Absolutely. We, Nick, have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think that there's been a real shift. And the shift has been mostly around just the awareness. We're talking about it a lot more. Government is talking about it a lot more, state and federal. There's funding available. EAPs, employee assistance programs, are really bolstering the work that they're doing, the work that you're doing. And I guess when people like yourself, are vulnerable in the public space, and being brave about calling it out, but at the same time educating, I guess, the masses of the fact that there are avenues for support, and avenues within professional bodies. So, I've just talked about some of the resources that we've got, the resources that you've got through your hub. I think there's certainly been a shift. We still have a long way to go, but if we don't start the conversation, if we don't have those meaningful conversations, then I think we're not going to achieve anything. So yeah, to your question, I think certainly there's movement, but where we now need to do is consolidate a lot of the noise that's happening and start to kind of work through really tangible, meaningful ways to address this issue.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more on that. I think it comes down to, there's been great awareness, but how can we now do the preventative side of things, and how do you actually implement it where people are going to use it and get that ongoing long-term value out of it? It's always the tricky part. So
absolutely,
we'll get there. So no, that's
We
been
will. We will.
super. Yeah, we will indeed. Well, super insightful. Thank you for sharing all of that. We finish every episode with 5 questions, so these aren't going to be anything too crazy for you that are not going to throw you under a bus here. But the first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Okay, so hands down, when I was 8 and my brother was 5, we were living in the UK. I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
And my parents loaded us into their Fiat. They put a big GB sticker at the back and took us on a 5-week European tour. A la the Brown Griswolds, as I like to call ourselves. And this was, Nick, well before mobile phones, well before internet, way before GPS and sat nav. My dad had this kind of big paper map. I think it was a kind of A3 map. And we just went, from one country to the next, and we stayed in B&Bs and motels and tents, and experienced what I think would be the best time of our lives, from kind of gondolas in Venice, and Eiffel Tower in Paris, Alps in Austria, the Vatican City. Okay, so I'm bragging a little bit, but, that was just, such great memories. So, and thanks so much for asking that, because that's just got my serotonin levels and dopamine levels up, because I often talk about it. I've been asked this before, and I always go back to that point
I love
where,
that. Yeah.
we were young and we traveled together.
That's so, it's so nice. And like, it made me feel good hearing it. And I actually used to do this in a lot of talks where you'd get people to do that exercise, I guess, where you just like think of something, the best time in your life or an amazing memory. And when you actually relay the story to someone, it does do that, doesn't it? It puts you back there. It's a good sort of mood booster. It's just, I guess, a reminder that we can all, think about these things or bring ourselves back daily when we, get stuck in different, things that are going on.
Totally.
So the next one, what do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in this industry?
I think it's a combination of both stigma that we
Mm-hmm.
talked about, and denial. We as a society in Australia, we've come a long way in opening up the conversation and the awareness and the shifts that we're seeing in mental health issues. But I think that stigma is still preventing many from actually acknowledging the problem, and that denial places a massive burden on one's health, their well-being, and their safety. Australia is so multicultural. It's why I love it. I mentioned it, when I first started, I'm a proud migrant here, but with that multiculturalism, we have different perspectives, tolerance, understanding, and acceptance of mental health conversation. And I'll speak for myself, the South Asian culture, we don't really talk about things like these, usually. And there's a view or a hope, certainly, that, if we're going through something, we'll just get over it, or, we might be going through a phase or something. So again, what you're doing is exemplary. It's so brave that, we can come together and talk about this important issue in the way that you're facilitating. And I think that will lift a lot of that burden on mental health. And so, in the construction industry, I think it's the same. I think, you can kind of use this concept and overlay it across multiple industries. And I think that's probably where we're at, the removal of the stigma and the burden.
I completely agree. I think that's a great answer. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
My personal definition of happiness would probably be, and again, we talked a bit about today, it's just a state of well-being, of being well, I guess, of people, the things and places and the environment, all of those forces combining to make certainly me feel, content, to make me feel safe and secure and healthy, both physically and emotionally. So I'll just give you an example, because I think I just rambled on a little bit about that. But when we were hit with lockdown here in Melbourne, lockdown capital of the world, there were so many instances of when I was actually happy because, I was with my family. Yes, we were isolated, but just the 4 of us, my husband, my 2 kids, we connected as a family and shared ourselves with each other like we've never done before. We played board games, we cooked, we had nothing else to do. We played, footy in the backyard. We talked a lot to each other and really connected. So, and since then, I've actually found that our family unit is stronger. and more connected. And that to me is happiness. So I think it's just that, yeah, state of being well.
I
Does that make
couldn't,
sense?
no,
Sorry, I just
absolutely. I think I love that answer. And I think, having that positive outlook on COVID as well and finding the positives, I think is important because, that's an extreme version of of a world event that happened. But, we all have ups and downs in life and there's no certainty. And I think it's easy for us to, in general, look at just the negatives, but we can actually find positives and growth and, different opportunities through everything that happens. So a lot of it is how we approach situations. I think it's a really good example.
so true.
So I've got two more here for you.
Oh.
What are you most afraid of?
I just, oh, I I'm going to be quite open here. I'm afraid I'm scared of drowning. Okay, because I
Okay.
can't swim. So I
Yeah.
know I've tried. I know. Let's not go there. Another podcast. So I don't like deep ends, right? So deep ends of swimming pools, oceans, but that fear of drowning has also been reflected in other areas of my life. Like I'm scared of drowning in too much work. I know too much work, just drowning in things that don't fulfill me,
Yeah.
or are unproductive. So just yeah, and I've always been scared also of being thrown to the deep end because I feel like I'll never be prepared. And in many ways, I think that's probably my own personality. Like in the work context, I always need to know what's happening so I can plan. I'm a bit of a planner. In a social context, like I just do not like surprises. I don't know, it's a bit boring, but and as far as travel's concerned, like I'm always scared of never knowing where I'm going, and my husband's always planning these trips, and I just have to know
Yeah.
because again, I mean, it could be to an ocean that I might have to get into. So I think for me, it's this kind of philosophical kind of drowning in the physical sense, but also just in my own life, kind of drowning in things that I'm not I'm
Yeah.
not used to.
Definitely. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I think it's it's
I
a
know it's
shared
very
fear.
abstract. I know I've got some really
I like it.
abstract
I like it.
responses here.
I love these. I love these responses. So final one, what are you most proud of?
Oh, that's an easy one. Look, I'm proud of my family. My very good husband, also Geelong supporter. In fact, he was the one that's got me and my whole family into supporting Geelong. And I've pretty much grown up with him. We've been together for 30 years. I've got two legendary sons. I've got a 20-year-old Nick, actually is his name, Nicholas, and an 18-year-old Matthew, who's finished school today. Year 12, that's the end. So and they're just hilarious, and I guess I'm also proud of myself for raising them, because got to give myself something there. But
Of
seriously,
course.
we
Yeah.
have our ups and downs, and life is full of crossroads, but when push comes to shove, we've got each other's backs and we respect each other, and we trust and love that. And I guess I'll always be proud of that.
I love that. I think that's a nice way to finish up. Oh, and final thing, if anyone listening wants to learn more about your organization, where's the best place? Just send them to a website or?
Website is the easiest, aca.org.au, short and simple.
Nice and simple. And we'll put that in the notes as well. So anyone that wants to learn more, go to the show notes and they'll be able to
Fantastic.
find when this is released all the links. So perfect. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate you making the time. Great talking to another fellow Geelong supporter as well.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there we go. We got the mug there. And I really do appreciate you making the time. It's been super valuable for us to be able to feature you on this series.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. You've just been a delight, and love the work that you're doing. You and Warren, amazing, and keep up doing what you're doing because it's making a difference, Nick. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to Angelina Pillai for joining me today for Move Your Mind. And just another reminder that the Move Your Mind book is available at nickbracks.com/book, and you can join our community by going to moveyourmind.me.